Nationwide lockdown due to COVID-19 pandemic has confined humans to their homes. It has given a population-free environment, but at the same time has brought in extreme anguish to the wildlife. Scarcity of food and water is impacting animals all across the globe. Strays have been struggling to find food. They have nothing and absolutely nothing to eat, not even the leftovers on which they always relied on. In this hard time of the pandemic, many people have extended a helping hand. Many strays have had a really bad time. They don't have a voice. Activists say that it is the responsibility of people to provide sustenance in order to help them survive this crisis. The World Animal Protection has been working to ensure that stray animals are not isolated. However, the selfless efforts of the individual groups cannot be ignored. The Animal Welfare Board of India, Friendicos, the International Animal Welfare Organization, North Delhi Municipal Corporation and others have launched a special initiative to feed stray animals during the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. Many of them also faced resistance and were accused of flouting government guidelines and even causing harm to public property by feeding them. A number of cities in India, including Delhi and Jaipur, issued feeders pass during the phase of complete lockdown. The pass permitted people to leave their houses to care for street animals. According to Section 3 of the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act 1960, it is the responsibility of the owners to prevent their pets from experiencing unnecessary pains or suffering. But due to the panic of this pandemic and the widespread virus, people have left their pets on the streets, and some owners are even deserting pets simply because they don't feel like it's safe to have a pet anymore. Under Section 11 of the PCA, any failure to provide an animal with sufficient food, water or shelter is a punishable offence, and it is cruel to abandon an animal or to make them suffer from starvation or dehydration. But on the other side, many animals have successfully reclaimed their space. The coronavirus brought in lockdown for humans, but it is clearly reaping great benefits for the wildlife. Many urban areas across the world are quieter, less crowded, and have seen the animal kingdom take charge. Dolphins have returned to the coasts of Italy as the cruise ships remain shut. Birds have returned to their spaces. Many wildlife species which were probably assumed to be extinct have come back. These are the few instances where wildlife came back amidst lockdown. New Delhi Bureau, Democracy News Live. Hello and welcome. You're watching Democracy News Live, and this is another episode of It Matters. Today we're going to talk about how the COVID-19 pandemic has affected animals. Well, it certainly has upended our lives, but moreover, animals have been left stranded to fend for themselves while the rescue workers have been demonized. We have a very interesting panel joining us today. We have Geeta Seshmani. She is the Vice President of Friendicos. Also joining us is Karthik Satyanarayan. He is the co-founder and CEO of Wildlife SOS, along with Rafat Ahmed, who's the founder of Animal Connect. Also joining us is Divya Guvara. She is founder of Kitchen for Paws. Thank you for joining us this evening. Beginning with you, Geeta. How do you think the pandemic has affected animals? What has your experience been like?
Immediately we realized that the street animals depend a lot upon the human beings around them. And once all the food shops, the restaurants, the hotels, everything closed down and people left for their homes and were too scared to come out during the lockdown, obviously the first thing that happened was that they felt very abandoned and hungry, and it became imperative that we start street feeding. We started on March 24th itself, and we immediately had over 2,000 animals. There were 200 monkeys, we had over 600 cows, we had about 1,800 dogs and cats joined them also for the food. And therefore, from whether 11 at night till 4 in the morning, we were just busy street dog feeding, street animal feeding. Also, almost immediately, we got a lot of abandoned pets. I think people felt if they had old animals, they could carry COVID-19, whether it was fear of COVID-19 itself, or it was that they had no public transport to take the animals to the vet. They couldn't get out, or they were too scared to get out to source food for the animals. But we had a flood of animals being abandoned and calls coming in. There were dogs tied up at Pragati Maidan gate, at Sarai Kale Khan, at our own gates. So we landed up getting over 65 abandoned pets right in the first 2 weeks of the COVID-19 lockdown. Also, a lot of sick animals were being reported because obviously, without food and without the nurturing care of dog feeders, the older animals, those that were already sick, were also deprived of medication. They were also deprived of care, which most dog feeders do give their pets, the street pets. And it resulted in a flood of animal calls that we should come out and rescue these animals. So we have been extremely busy right from March 24th. Frenicos didn't close down even for a day. We continued to keep our clinic open. We tried to follow all the government guidelines of the mask. We set up a sanitization tunnel. We kept social distancing, and within about a few days of COVID-19 lockdown starting, people were bringing in their pets for treatment and for emergency care. So it's been a very busy time, and it's gratifying to know that we were able to help in such a big way.
Thank you so much there, Geeta. Incredible work, in fact, done during the time when animals were helpless and they really needed that care. Karthik, during the whole lockdown, did you come across any challenges when it came to supplying food or medicines to animals? Karthik, are you able to hear us? All right, we'll try and reconnect with Karthik there. But coming to you, Rafat, you've also been feeding stray dogs, animals on a daily basis. Did you come across any challenges where people would stop you? Perhaps there was a fear that they were carriers too. Were you also demonized, or perhaps did people misbehave with you as well? Rafat, are you able to hear us? I think there seems to be some connection error there. Let me go across to Divya if she's available. Divya, can you hear? Divya, are you able to hear us? Hi, Divya, are you able to hear me? Hi, Divya, are you able to hear me? Divya? I think we're having some trouble connecting there. Let me go back to Geeta. We'll try and reconnect with everyone. I think somebody's audio is down and there's some technical glitches happening right now. Geeta, if you're able to hear me, let me put that question to you. Were there any difficulties when it came to feeding dogs on the street? Because I remember there were incidents where people really didn't want dog feeders out on the streets, and they were scared that dogs would be carriers.
Yes, indeed, it led to many ugly incidents. And our boys too had a tough time. We were sending out almost 5 vehicles. And very often people would feel that because we were feeding dogs in the street, we were attracting COVID-19 in some magical manner to them. And therefore, there were a lot of ugly incidents, particularly after the second lockdown was imposed and people were coming out maybe to pick up provisions, etc. They would get into altercations with a lot of dog feeders who had to keep on proving the point that these dogs or these animals are not carriers of COVID-19, led to a lot of beating ups and ugly scenes altogether. In fact, I think that was one of the main things. Almost all the dog feeders who've been really brave and by the second lockdown were coming out to take care of animals. Almost all of them had to brave that kind of public anger. I think there was a kind of a build-up of rage and frustration. No one knew what would happen next. Their jobs were in jeopardy. They didn't know what they'd be earning or looking. And I think it was just like boiling over sometimes with temper tantrums with our dog feeders and with people who were trying to take care of or medicate animals in the street.
Right, and Geeta, uh, there have been incidents, they were reported. Was there any action taken against dog feeders who were brutally perhaps assaulted on the streets? I remember this one woman feeding, stray dogs here in New Delhi, and she was beaten up by people at that colony.
You know, dog feeders really depend a lot on public empathy. And while they do police complaints, while they do try to get police protection, it doesn't always work like there's just not enough of security given to them. Even the police can sometimes be unsympathetic and tell you, why do you get into the face of the public, or just leave the food in one corner for the animal, because there's very little understanding of animal behavior and how dog feeders have to go from place to place to feed the little groups of animals that are territorial. Dogs and cats don't move out of their territory. Dog feeders have to reach them there in order to feed them or medicate them. So there have been these kind of problems due to a lack of perception or empathy with animals. And all in all, the police had their hands full. As you know, they did almost everything during COVID-19. They have been enormous heroes for us. And I think wherever dog feeders appealed to them for help, they gave help. I remember that so many times a policeman would call us because he would feel sorry for an animal that had been tied and left somewhere, and we would go and pick the animal up. So I think everybody had their hands full, Jessica. It would be unfair to say that people weren't trying hard. But these are uncertain times. Everybody's worried even about their own place in themselves. So one has to cut them some slack.
All right, then some slack, but also, Geeta, do you think people learned a lesson from the pandemic when it comes to nurturing animals? And perhaps we've seen a lot of videos where wildlife has reclaimed its spaces, and that has been a silver lining.
That has been amazing. It just shows us that nature is given a bit of space and a bit of freedom. She can reassert herself, she can rejuvenate, she can renew herself. It's been extremely heartening to be able to see how these animals come back and use the spaces when our vehicles and buses and railways are not crisscrossing and creating mayhem across the landscape. But it's always been a difficult call for wildlife, to balance human progress and human activity with giving the required space, habitat, environment, prevent fragmentation happening. I think COVID-19 was a brilliant illustration of how, while we do need progress and employment to improve for our people, we do need to figure out how to give space and habitat back to animals. COVID-19 is just showing that there has to be some more effort put into balancing, some more effort into keeping green covers going, to be more sensible in how we disrupt the natural environment. And if nature is left to herself, she can rejuvenate and regenerate very quickly.
Right, right. And Geeta, help us understand. Did you face any difficulties when it comes to rescue efforts during lockdown?
I think what we suffered was a sort of breakdown of being able to get medicines. One buys medicines as and one needs them. And with no public transport happening, it was very difficult, and stock started running low at almost all places where we needed veterinary medicines. That was one kind of a problem. And I think reaching out to all the animals is virtually impossible for any one organization to do. So we had a lot of mortalities, of course, in the street, because normally the dog feeders are like an army. They take, not only do they feed, but they also take care, and it's not just dog feeders. I mean, people look after anything. They look after monkeys, cats, all animals, cows. We did a lot of cow feeding. People left, I don't know whether dairy farms closed down or what was the issue, but large mandis and marketplaces were no longer, they were not functioning.
I think we seem to have some
So
technical
there were
glitches
lots.
today. We'll try and resume. Hello, Geeta, are you able to hear me? I see we're facing massive technical issues today. Most of us
Not
haven't been
making
able
you.
to connect.
I think there's a kind of a time lag or something, so we're talking over each other a bit. But I was just saying the cows too were running behind vehicles for food. It was that bad a situation because the big mandis and marketplaces were closed down. And it's only then you realize how many animals, we call them community pets, our law protects them. But it's only then that one began to realize that how much our natural way of life, you keep the marketplaces going, animals depend upon that for their food. The kind of waste and how much they help in keeping the streets clean because normally they eat up all this stuff which would otherwise be thrown on the roads and now they didn't have access to it,
Hmm.
so problematic.
Hmm. Oh, great. So
I
we
think
have everyone back on the screen. Yes. Karthik, as Geeta was pointing out, there there have been massive difficulties when it comes to, say, cows. I even, Geeta, saw one of the videos where Frontico's team was actually feeding watermelons to monkeys as well. So, Karthik, did you feel that throughout the lockdown period, were rescue efforts thwarted in some way or the other?
It was a huge challenge, Jessica, to manage the rescue hotline and continue rescue efforts through the COVID period. But that was when the animals needed help the most because logistics was a challenge. Organizing food supplies and medical supplies was really quite difficult. And for that reason, we made sure that we worked round the clock and stretched our resources to ensure that we could be there for wild animals in distress as well as people who wanted to report animal calls. I think Wildlife SOS received over 2,000 calls about wild animals in distress. This included everything from snakes, birds, leopards, elephants, bears, jackals, etc. And I think in the middle of the pandemic lockdown, we even had to do an elephant rescue. I think we rescued a few crocodiles, and of course, hundreds and hundreds of snakes, birds, and all kinds of other species, hyenas, and all the rest of it. So yeah, the COVID lockdown was a challenge, but I think the police were really helpful. We had a lot of support from the police and the forest department and the district administration authorities and the government. So I'm very grateful that there was public sympathy and support. Also, it was a huge challenge to raise the financial resources to pay for protective equipment for our staff as well as taking care of the animals. We were feeding over 30 elephants at any given point of time and over 300 bears every single day. So yes, it was stretching us, but thankfully, the time is coming to an end, and hopefully, people will continue to support efforts of organizations like Wildlife SOS.
Absolutely. You guys do incredible work nonetheless. Also, Rafat, you feed dogs on a daily basis. Have you faced any incidents of violent attacks on you, perhaps of the fact that many believed or assumed that dogs would be carriers and the lack of research has created, more chaos?
Quite a few. It's been real bad. Initially, during the initial days, we had people when we were feeding outside there on the road, main roads. They would come and start fighting with us that आप यहाँ पे क्यों खिला रहे हो? हम मर जाएंगे, हमें problem हो जाएगी. So we tried explaining it to them, and they were like, नहीं ये तो news में भी आया है. I mean, how do you explain it to these guys? So they would come and give us puppies that आप रखो, we can't keep them anymore. अगर हम बीमार हो गए, who's gonna take care of the families? So it did take time for us to explain it to them. Ultimately, they did understand, but it's just that not near our house, not even on the road. You will go right to the corner and towards the end of the whole thing and then feed. And they would start beating up the dogs also there. So it was very difficult, yes.
Right. And Divya, did you also face similar challenges because you run Kitchen for Paws and you feed dogs on a daily basis? Were there similar incidents or perhaps none at your end? Divya, I think there are audio issues still. I'm unable to hear you. All right, we'll come back to you, Divya, because there are audio issues and I'm unable to hear you. Let me go back to Geeta. Geeta, in the times like these, do you think that we should be able to help out animals as much as we can instead of perhaps moving away and running away because there's lack of research. Most people would shun their pets, as you mentioned. Most people won't come out of their houses. They said all kinds of animals could be carriers. There's lack of research, perhaps, yes, and there's all kinds of false news being played out on TV and WhatsApp University. So what is your message to people who want to genuinely help out animals out there, and how should they go about it?
Um, I would suggest that at times of crisis like this, people must depend upon their instincts of compassion. They must understand that they are having a tough time, so are the animals on the street. And I think a lack of knowledge about this COVID-19 has led to um, unexpected, or let's say unwanted cruelty to animals, and a lot of infighting between neighbors and in neighborhoods unnecessarily. But rather than abandon an animal, I would say at least take it to a shelter. At least take it to a group of people who can take care of it. What happened was that we found a lot of people didn't want to venture out in order to safeguard themselves against the problem, against the possibility of catching COVID-19. And therefore, they were just tying them up to parks, to trees, to lampposts. So I say, even if you are not in a position for any reason whatsoever to take care of your animal, at least get it to a safe place. At least give it to us at a shelter or to a group of people who take care of animals. That's the least you can do to an animal which should be your family member, really. You should not even be thinking of abandoning it, just like you would not think of abandoning your own child. But in case you are, at least get it to a place of safety and compassion and care. So I think so long as you're guided by kind of empathy and compassion, you won't land up doing things which are outrageous or against human nature.
Yeah, and Karthik, take Geeta's point forward. What is your message to people?
My message to people is, please be compassionate. Think of doing the same kind of actions that you would want people to mete out to you. What you sow is what you're going to reap. And so I would strongly request people to look inside of themselves. I mean, it's not that they need to spend a ton of money, but they can do whatever their heart can afford to make sure that the animals around their fringe, in their immediate environment, receive and a sport of kindness. That's all it takes, really. It doesn't take much more than that to reach out and be kind. And I've had umpteen instances when people have called me saying there's a snake inside my house, and all I tell them is our team will come there, but it's going to take them 25 minutes to reach you. In the meantime, can you ensure that nobody harms the snake and you don't try to catch it or cause it any kind of problem? And people have been surprisingly kind, compassionate, and understanding. And I repeatedly tell them, just note down our hotline number. And I'd like to give the hotline number so people can note it down here as well. It's 98719 63535. And if you could also reiterate that, it would save thousands of animal lives. If people can call the Wildlife SOS hotline instead of trying to take things into their own hands. Also, if people are unsure, I request them to just email us or contact us by through the internet. And people can reach Wildlife SOS on wildlifesos.org. It's as simple as that. There's one other thing that we've been doing through the lockdown is trying to reach out to people around India and encouraging them to pause and see what is it that we're doing to animals around us. Like, for example, just elephants alone. Elephants have been used for from time immemorial in India. But the way those elephants are used for tourist rides and things like that, it's just the amount of cruelty and abuse that these animals suffer from a very young age when they are separated from their herd, from the forest, and then abused, and so much of pain and wanton cruelty that's imposed on these animals. We've been encouraging people to think, is it really necessary to subject an elephant to a lifetime of cruelty just so you can have a little ride on its back? So we have a campaign called Refuse to Ride, and there's a resource website called refusetoride.org, and we've been encouraging people to go to this website and arm themselves with information and empower themselves so they can take the decision to do the right thing to support protection of wildlife around India and other places in the world.
Right, Karthik, great message there. I hope people absorb this and are able to help and sort of build that relationship with animals around them and not shun them and not disrespect them as they have been. That's an undeniable fact. Rafat, you were just mentioning that you perhaps were at the receiving end of such violence and such attacks. What's your message to people who are going out to dog feed? Or perhaps is there something you'd like to add when it comes to how not compassionate towards animals around them? They could see them bleeding but not do anything about it. Most of them just look away and would perhaps walk away, not even caring about the poor soul.
Now thankfully, Touchwood, after trying and explaining things to people, they have understood, and now they come right to me and they say that the dog is hurt, or there is a dog with a maggot wound, or there are a couple of dogs starving in the jungle across the road, or in so and so place, or in so and so sector. So yes, they do come and inform me, and they say we do whatever we can, but we can't do it the way you do. We can maybe give like 3-4 rotis or whatever, but a proper meal is something that we cannot provide to them. So if you can come and help us out, it's going to be great. So we do. I take up quite a bit. I have taken up quite a bit. I am feeding large animals as well, but there is only so much that I can do. And the only saving grace is if people can't help, they just tell me. I mean, they don't hit the animals anymore. They don't shoo them away. They just come and inform us if you can help them out. Otherwise, if you can send them to a shelter, so that awareness is there. Yeah, so it's a saving base.
Right, and Divya, are you able to hear us now?
I can hear you.
Divya, are you able to hear us now?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Right.
It's okay.
Yes, Divya. So why don't you tell us about your initiative? Why don't you tell us about your initiative?
See, I started this in 2012, and it started obviously like for all feeders, it starts with one dog and it just increases. So just before lockdown, I had around 350 dogs. But suddenly, literally in 2 days, the number of dogs became maybe approx 650. So it was overnight, there were so many dogs, and I feed in a barren space or on the highway. I really don't go into the colonies as such. So I could just see dogs coming out of nowhere into the spots where the feeding spots were, because obviously dogs are territorial, so you feed them in bits and you feed them in areas. You kind of demarcate this many dogs in this area, this many dogs in that area. So numbers was a very big issue that I faced. And of course, because numbers increased, you needed a lot of funds for that. And I was definitely not prepared for that. And I have to say that initially the support did come in, because I would say that was a lot of compassion support. And it did come in initially, although people there was a dagger hanging on people's heads that they may lose the jobs, they may not. So initial support was there. I would say I'm facing more of an issue regarding funds at this moment, because a lot of people have lost their jobs or their salaries have been cut down. So funds have been a little bit of a issue, not little bit, a very big issue. And of course, initially the staff went away. Suddenly the staff went away. So that was a very big issue as well. And it was really tough. the staff issue was very tough for me. I didn't have people screaming or people fighting with me. Touch wood, none of that happened with me, and I did not face a group of people telling me that it's corona and the dogs are going to uh, infect us. I didn't face any of that problem, although the numbers were huge. But it's more on the highway and more on barren land, so there weren't many people to fight with me. So I was protected on that space. But facing team issue was there. That was a very big issue. And yes, arranging passes to go. I feed from Gurgaon to Delhi. I go till the airport from Cyber City till the airport. It's a big belt. So that was the thing, I had to write. But I have to say the police was very compassionate. I did not even face any issue with the police. They were very kind. They let the car go. They knew that we were feeding animals. In fact, they asked us to feed where they were stationed. So I faced none of those issues. Actually, I think I'm very lucky. None of the problems came up. The main problem for me was funds. I managed to do the feeding as well, but yes, funds have been a very big problem for me. Other than that, I think
Right. And
besides that, yeah. Besides that, I would say
go, no, please go ahead.
I think the rescue work is something I wasn't much into because I would say I'm more a feeder. Yes, now I have 600 dogs. But I started doing a lot of rescue work because suddenly there were so many whether it's breed dogs or any kind of dogs, they were just abandoned. And as Geeta had put forward, they were just tied to poles, tied in the park. So yes, I did pick up. Of course, I can't say the kind of numbers Geeta has been doing. It's fabulous what Friendicos does. But in my own capacity as a individual, whatever best I could do, one picked them up. One has got a lot of dogs adopted in these last 3-4 months, and it's very fulfilling, I would say. Very, very fulfilling. And of course, one has encountered breeders trying to pick up the breed dogs. Um, you know, a lot of breeders try to come when they see a breed dog being a dog which is a good breed being abandoned. So one has faced these kinds of situations,
Hmm.
which one has understood how to handle. And yes, it's been very hectic. Last few months have been very hectic, but very fulfilling. Very, very
Right.
fulfilling.
Right. Good for you and the society there, Divya. Thank you. Geeta, that brings me to my last question with all of you. Unfortunately, we've run out of time and because of all the technical glitches that we face. So, um, Geeta, when it comes to adopting a dog or adopting an animal, most people are confused. They'd rather go buy. What's your advice to them?
Adopt from the shelters. There's nothing, an animal gives so much of love because it knows it's getting a second chance at life. Their gratitude, their loyalty is amazing. Once you adopt from a shelter, you'll see the difference. I would have no hesitation. All my life, I've only taken the older dogs from shelters, taken them home, and that's the advice I would give. Please go and give a second chance to an animal at life. Go to a shelter, go to any kind of a rescue center, and please take the animals from there home. There's buying
Right.
and
And Karthik, what about you? What's
pardon.
I'm sorry, I
I
couldn't
would
hear.
also
Continue, Geeta. We've got. Okay.
I really would like to stop this the overbreeding of puppies, the abandoning of puppies,
Yeah.
and we get so many females that have been bred and bred again and again, and they're in terrible shape. Though they are 5, 6 years old, they come with pyometra, prolapses. That itself should be a warning to us that they are being sold are not healthy. There's no proper vaccination. The animals are not cared for when they are sold to customers. So it's a real good idea to put an end to this overbreeding and puppy mills that is happening all over the place. Instead, please go to a shelter and take care of an animal there.
Right. Excellent, excellent advice, Geeta. What's your advice, Karthik? What would you like to tell viewers who are watching this? Perhaps how can they come and help and how should they do their bit?
Well, I think everyone can help make a difference. And I think we are all responsible for making sure we leave the planet as we found it. If we come here and mess it up, and go, we are messing it up not only for ourselves, but for the future generations as well. So we have an innate responsibility that we have to fulfill. So we've got to make sure we don't throw garbage. We treat animals and trees and wildlife with care, compassion. And if people are not sure, they connect with organizations like Friendicos or Wildlife SOS or other groups that are involved in supporting animal care, and ensure that they contribute either their time, they can just volunteer, help them out, respond in a responsible manner, and if they can't, help. That nature showed us that she didn't need human beings at all. We need nature. She doesn't need us. She showed us that animals will take over, the trees will take over, the rivers will go back to being clean, and so will the seas. And human beings will be washed away, and they'll just remain as a memory in the planet. So we've got to be responsible and be careful about how we treat nature all around us, and that includes animals, birds, reptiles, and every form of biodiversity.
Right. And Rafat, what about you? What's your message?
My message is Mother Nature has taught us a lot in this much time. It's high time we start respecting Mother Nature. We respect all living beings. Everyone has a right to live on the same planet, and everyone needs to respect the other one. It's not that if we are living here, we don't want the snakes around because they might harm us. Snakes, no animal harms us without us trying to harm them, or if I mean, it's like a defensive thing. If they think we are trying to harm them, that is when they would harm us. We've had so many snakes around. None of the snakes have ever harmed any of the dogs also, nor any human being. So yeah, it's if you don't like dogs, don't like feeding dogs, don't like animals, don't do anything to them. Just let them be. But don't harm them at least. That's the least we can do.
Right. Don't harm them. I agree with that. That's the least we can do. How about you, Divya? What's your message?
It's pretty much about nature actually, because I just feel that we are living in the land that belonged to them. Please let them be. It's just so unfair. We've taken away their space. The least we can do is feed them. Go out on the roads, feed the cows, feed the dogs. They're eating plastic and you having their milk. Not fair. Not fair. Just take care of them. Give them something. Just take care of two dogs. If you cannot take care of more, take care of two outside your house. But look after them. Have the compassion and let Mother Nature be. Most important. Let it be. Don't cut the forests. I mean, a lot of us have been going trekking into the mountains in this lockdown. Why? Because at some level, the heart and soul wants to connect to nature. So let nature be. Let animals be. Just let them be. That's it. Nothing else.
So I think that's the message we have from all our guests joining in today. Thank you very much. Despite the audio glitches, everybody made it to the show. Really, your valuable insights should help people understand how to be more compassionate. Perhaps now that we have information on being able to reach out to you guys whenever they're thinking about helping any animal around them, or perhaps want to make a donation of sorts as well. Thank you, everyone, for a wonderful, wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you
you,
for having us.
Jessica. Thank you.